will have safe authentication with email and password. Actually, we are going to use Supabase, and we could have a lot of different ways to add authentication, like social sign-ins, like SMS sign-in, like two-factor authentication. But for this workshop, we'll keep it nice and simple with just email and password. We're gonna have a relational database with proper schemas, keys, and relationships between the tables. We're going to have data persistent and the real-time modification. And we will have a complete app ready to deploy on the web. Now, when I say a complete app, I mean that everything will be indeed complete, except for payments. For payments, we will only take cash, basically. But Bolt has just released, I think, 4 days ago, a new integration with Stripe. So if you are interested, we can have another webinar in the future where we add actual payment gateways to our application. So how are we going to add all that to our app with Bolt? Well, we won't. Well, we will, but we won't. Let me explain. So instead of just using Bolt, we're going to use Bolt with Supabase, because Supabase can integrate with Bolt with just a button. Now, what is Supabase? And no, I won't accept the Firebase killer as a valid answer. Personally, I used a lot of Firebase in the past, but there are some things that make Supabase a really good alternative. Not necessarily better or worse, but it's different. So in a sentence, Supabase is a backend as a service. And what does it mean? This means that we can connect our app to our Supabase account and immediately have a backend instead of building our own in Node.js or Spring or Django or whichever technology you personally prefer. And what are the main use cases for a backend? We use it to store our data. So in Supabase, we'll be able to store our data. We will use it for user authentication, which again, we will be able to do in Supabase. We use it to access data and interact with them through APIs. And in Supabase's case, we can use REST APIs or GraphQL APIs, which are immediately generated when you create a table. So let's say that I create a table for a person, and they have a name, a surname, and an age. When I create the table, immediately Supabase will create REST and GraphQL APIs so I can access this table's information. And we also use the backend to run specific parts of our application. Specifically, anything that is too complex and heavy for a client, or anything that needs extra security because it's sensitive data like payments. So, why do we use Supabase instead of Firebase or another alternative? Well, there are three main reasons. First reason is that Supabase uses relational databases. And relational databases are not necessarily better or worse than non-relational. It's just that since SQL is much older and much more popular than using non-relational databases, this will be easier for people to understand because it's much more universal. Second reason is that Supabase is more cost-effective than Firebase in most use cases. While Firebase charges by the action, so for addition, deletion, edition, or just reading data, Supabase charges by the volume of the data you have. So it's much easier to go profitable with Supabase, even with a half business plan, because it scales with you. While on Firebase, if I have someone who does a lot of actions, even if it's one user, I might be charged a lot for it. While with Supabase, if I have a user that interacts a lot with our app, but doesn't store a whole lot of data, then I can still keep up with the free plan for a very long time. And the most important reason, which I left for last, is that Supabase is the easiest one to connect with Bolt. You may have heard the saying that money loves speed, and that's especially true in software.